I'm Michael Steele in for Joy Reid, and we begin tonight with a look ahead to day one of Trump 2.0. The Biden administration is in its waning days, and in just 3 days, Donald Trump will be inaugurated as the 47th president. Although the weather in the nation's capital has put a chill on the pomp and circumstance Trump was hoping for. Today it was announced that the swearing in will be moved indoors because of expected low temperatures, which means that Trump will now take the oath of office from inside the Capitol Rotunda, the exact location where just 4 years ago a violent mob of Trump supporters clashed with Capitol Police. Now, despite the small change, one big thing will stay the same. At the stroke of noon Monday, the administration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will end, and the era of Donald Trump, 2.0, will begin. On the campaign trail, Trump made a lot of promises about what he'll do on day one.
On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history. When I win, I will immediately bring prices down starting on day one.
You promised to end birthright citizenship on day one. Is that still your plan?
Yeah, absolutely. He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one. We're closing the border, and we're drilling.
Living for day one. But the one area he's made clear he plans to make good on his promises is his immigration crackdown. His team has prepared a flood of executive orders starting day one, aimed at launching the process of resurrecting policies from his first term and shredding Biden administration immigration policy. Many of the executive orders will address his day one MAGA promises from his presidential campaign, including closing the southern border, terminating all Biden border policies, reinstating the travel ban from his first term, beginning a mass deportation program, and ending birthright citizenship. Now, to that end, folks, today, Trump's choice for Homeland Security Secretary, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, faced senators for her confirmation hearing. But one thing she wasn't very clear on is who will be calling the shots on border security. Noem, or Trump's so-called border czar, Tom Homan, who Trump has said will be in charge of the border. And as promised, deportations will begin, you guessed it, on day one.
Tom and I work very well together and talk and communicate all the time, and we'll be working together on a daily basis when we're in our positions under the new administration. And I would say there's no authorities being planned to be taken away from the department or myself if I'm in the role, and we'll continue to oversee
signals. You can understand how people in my home state, maybe around the country, when they hear Mr. Homan saying, I'm making the decisions, when they hear President-elect Trump say he's in charge of our border.
Joining me now is Melissa Murray, NYU law professor, MSNBC legal analyst, and co-host of the Strict Scrutiny podcast. Tara Setmayer, former Republican communications director and co-founder and CEO of the Seneca Project. And Maria Hinojosa, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist and founder of Futuro Media. Welcome, all three ladies. Melissa, day one, it's going to be a hell of a day. How do you see this unfolding as all of the pomp and circumstances occurring in the Capitol, down at the White House, those executive orders, particularly around immigration, are going to be set up and ready for the president, the new president, to sign? What does that say in terms of the priority for this administration, and what should the American people expect from this day one explosion of executive orders?
Well, thanks for having me, Michael. I think we should take Donald Trump at his word. He's made clear that he plans to use executive authority to get things done on day one. And thanks to the United States Supreme Court, that executive authority is probably broader than it's ever been in the history of the American presidency. So there's a lot of room to work here with. He's already said that he's going to launch the largest mass deportation in the history of this country. That conflicts a little bit with some of the rhetoric from his campaign, where he talked about deporting first those with criminal records. It doesn't really match up on the number of individuals who have criminal records who are eligible to be deported. Does not add up to the largest mass deportation in history. So that means you're going to have to find additional people if this is, in fact, going to be a massive and sweeping effort. And I think the way that happens is we begin to think differently about what constitutes criminal activity relative to those who are here undocumented or unlawfully. And I think just the fact of crossing the border without the necessary papers is a misdemeanor offense. But I think they could think about that as a crime, expand the number of individuals who are here criminally, and again, think about those deportations. All of this will require procedural hurdles. There are lots of procedural checks in place, even for deporting those who have criminal records. So this isn't going to be an immediate thing, but I think we're going to see the mechanisms move quite quickly. I also imagine that there will be some efforts to roll back in plans that were put in place by the Biden administration, certainly on energy. The Biden electric vehicle mandate will be rolled back. There will be more drilling. It's all going to be a flurry, and again, all done through executive orders principally.
You know, Tara, it's the shock and awe of it all. You know, it is the blatant pushing out of a lot of information, sort of setting the stage narratively, if nothing else. You've got this incredible list of some of Trump's day one MAGA promises, ending the war in Ukraine, pardon Jan 6 defendants, drill, cancel the electric vehicle mandate, implement 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada, and then we grab Canada and make it the 51st state, bring down the grocery prices, which Trump has now admitted, I don't know if I can do that, close the border, end Biden-era border policies, reinstate travel ban, end DEI policies, ban transgender women from women's sports, end gender-affirming care practices. Day one. What's your assessment of day one as we get ready for Monday?
Well, people need to be prepared. I think that this country is about to wake up to a Mike Tyson level left hook of reality come 12/01 January 20th. We've been trying to warn folks about this. We tried. During the election, we tried. I think that there was a certain failure of being able to communicate this in a way that made people understand what was at stake for them, why it mattered. I think it's become increasingly more clear that this election was really not about the price of eggs, because a lot of these things that Donald Trump in that list right there, was there anything that was going to help the economic situation for Americans in any of those things that was listed, the day one priorities? No, not one, because this wasn't about the price of eggs. And for us at the Seneca Project, we just put out an ad today called Get Ready, because people need to get ready in this country. There are tens of millions of folks who did not vote for this, who are looking for leadership, who are looking for what to do, how to galvanize, how to organize, because we have to fight back. Every single one of us plays a role here. Bobby Kennedy said that tiny ripples of hope can create a current that can take down mountains of oppression. That's what we are facing, and that's what we're going to have to do. This country has faced all kinds of issues in the past, whether it was the abolitionist movement, whether it was the civil rights movement, the suffragist movement for women. And great to hear about the ERA today. Thank you, President Biden. But all of those movements didn't happen overnight, and they were all incredibly challenging. And it took the righteous anger of the American people to fight back against the government in ways that was oppressing basic civil rights in this country across the board. So we're about to head into an era in this country that we have not seen before, because the institutions aren't going to save us. The Supreme Court's not going to save us. No one's going to save us but us. And that is something I think the American people are going to find out very quickly, that Donald Trump doesn't give a damn about them or the Constitution or the rule of law. He cares about himself. He cares about enriching further himself and his billionaire cronies. And that is not going to do anything to help any normal, regular, everyday folks who voted for him thinking the price of eggs were going to come down. Yeah, good luck. Let's see how all those things impact that. It's not going to. They're going to have a wake-up call.
Maria, both Melissa and Tara really speak to, at the core, what Joe Biden himself sort of leveled up in his farewell address to the nation. Let's take a listen to his interview with Lawrence O'Donnell regarding his concerns about our democracy.
I really am concerned about how fragile democracy is. I guess what I'm worried about is that the thing that keeps it on track are the guardrails. There's a Supreme Court that's independent, but accountable. There's a Congress that you speak your mind, but you're held accountable to basic standards. There's a presidency that says you have really limited powers. I mean, you're the top dog, but you're not. You can't dictate everything. And I don't know. We just seem to be chipping away at all those elements.
In a confirmation hearing for a MAGA firebrand who could not even make it clear if she was going to be in charge of the border and mass deportations. Those two issues, of course, day one priorities for Team Trump that should fall under DHS purview. Here's Stephen Miller on that topic back in November.
It's going to be at light speed, Sean. The moment that President Trump puts his hand on that Bible and takes the oath of office, as he has said, the occupation ends, Liberation Day begins. He will immediately sign executive orders, sealing the border shut, beginning the largest deportation operation in American history.
So this is a thing that, if it's happening, starts Monday at noon. And as we sit here today, nobody knows if it's going to be that guy, Stephen Miller, alongside border czar Tom Homan, doing that thing, leading the charge, or if it will be Kristi Noem, who sat for her confirmation hearing today. And the question arises, is the Trump administration trying to avoid congressional oversight completely for whatever it is they have planned? Here's Senator Andy Kim on that.
I guess I just want to ask you just point blank, like, who's going to be in charge of the border?
Well, the president will be in charge of the border. It's a national security issue, and the president is in charge of this country and has made a promise to the American people, and we will fulfill his agenda.
But I guess I got confused. When Trump made the announcement about Tom Homan, he said, quote, I'm pleased to announce that Tom Homan, and said that he's in charge of our nation's borders. So I guess, again, I'd just like to go back to you. How are you going to work with Mr. Homan? What is the division there? I'm trying to get a better sense of who's in charge.
Yeah, Tom Homan is an incredible human being who has over 30 years of experience.
Incredible experience.
Yeah,
I get
at
that.
the border.
I'm just trying to think through
the insight and wisdom.
Decision-making process when it comes to your work. For instance, will he be giving orders directly to CBP, ICE, USCIS?
Tom Homan has a direct line to the president. He is an advisor to the president, the border czar. I obviously will be, if nominated and confirmed, and put into the position of being the Department of Homeland Security Secretary and responsible for the authorities that we have and the actions that we take.
So I just raise that as a concern of mine, because not only is that about the function of our executive branch, but also the capabilities of this committee to be able to properly do our constitutional duties for oversight, the ability for us to be able to have that conversation.
Noem also faced questions about other critical functions of the Department of Homeland Security, including disaster relief. Here's what she said about playing politics with disaster aid.
I assume you will agree with me that withholding disaster relief by President Trump or any other chief executive of the United States is a violation of his duty and of law.
Well, Senator, leadership has consequences. And looking at the tragedy that's happening in California,
I want to ask you yes or no, with all due respect. It's an easy...
What's happening in California is the ramification of many decisions over many years. But under my leadership at the Department of Homeland Security, there will be no political bias to how disaster relief is delivered to the American people.
So if President Trump were to say to you, we're going to withhold money from Connecticut or Michigan or any of the states, Iowa, because we don't like the governor or we don't like the politics of the state, you would stand up to him and say, Mr. President, we need to allocate that money.
Well, Senator, in 3 days, President Trump will take an oath to uphold the Constitution and the rule of law in this country, and he will do that, and I'll be glad to have him back.
And I don't speak
to hypotheticals, which is what you're asking me to do, but what I will tell you is that as Secretary, I will do the same. I will deliver the programs as the
Well, it's
laws
more than a
dictate.
hypothetical, with all due respect, and I apologize for interrupting you, but my time is limited, as you know, as a veteran of these hearings. It's more than a hypothetical. It's based on experience with President Trump withholding money from Washington State and elsewhere. I need to know from you, will you stand up to the president?
Will you stand up to the president. And it's a question now about the person who will most likely head the Department of Homeland Security in a second Trump administration. That was Kristi Noem's confirmation hearing, and it is where we start today with some of our most favorite reporters and friends. NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard is here with me at the table for the hour. Co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend, Alicia Menendez, is back. Also back, president of the National Action Network, host of MSNBC's Politics Nation, the Reverend Al Sharpton's here. Let me ask you, Vaughn Hilliard, about Kristi Noem. She was talked about all the time. Her name floated around all the time over the summer, into the summer, ahead of her own publicity tour for her own book, about her own account, about shooting her own puppy who was wild. It was reported that Trump didn't love that, which is fascinating because let me put up a headline about what Trump wanted to do to migrants to this country. Quote, shoot migrants' legs, build alligator moat behind Trump's ideas for border. This was a 2019 piece of reporting in the New York Times that says this. Privately, the president had often talked about fortifying a border wall with a water-filled trench stocked with snakes or alligators, prompting aides to seek a cost estimate. He wanted the wall electrified with spikes on top that could pierce human flesh. After publicly suggesting that soldiers shoot migrants if they threw rocks, the president backed off when his staff told him that was illegal. But later in a meeting, aides recalled he suggested that they shoot migrants in the legs to slow them down. That's not allowed either, they told him. This is conduct, I guess, that could again fall under the purview of the governor, Governor Noem. And this is a political figure totally unique in American political life who is ascending to the executive branch, to a cabinet post, after describing an act so brutal. I think about 100% of Americans disapproved of it. Where does she stand today in Trump's inner circle?
She is somebody who, let's be very clear, Donald Trump is tasking with a remarkable request to oversee what he says would be a mass deportation effort, the largest since Dwight D. Eisenhower. Kristi Noem from South Dakota, I mean, I was out there back in 2018 when she narrowly won her race for governor. She was the congresswoman at the time. And yet what he is asking her to do is oversee a deportation program that, frankly, we have not seen in our major urban areas since Sheriff Joe Arpaio was at the helm of the sheriff's office in the greater Phoenix area back from 2005 to 2016. I remember Reverend Sharpton was out there at some of the protests back at the time of the signing of SB 1070, and Joe Arpaio and his sheriff's office was responsible for tens of thousands of individuals in Maricopa County being deported, yet ultimately his workplace raids in which his office targeted workplaces in which there were suspected undocumented immigrants working, and also what he called crime suppression sweep, which is where he'd send his sheriff's deputies into predominantly brown neighborhoods and pull people over, for example, a broken taillight, and then check their immigration records and ultimately turn them over to federal ICE authorities and have them deported. All of that came crashing down when a federal court stepped in and said that it amounted to racial profiling. And so I think what Kristi Noem is being asked by Donald Trump is something that Joe Arpaio struggled to do even in just one locality, in one jurisdiction. And what is in front of her is a promise that Donald Trump has made to the American public quite prominently at the Republican National Convention. There were signs of mass deportations now, and she is the one, the South Dakota governor, who is being asked to go and ultimately work with ICE, who has limited resources relatively, in order to pull off such a feat as this. It's really quite a remarkable request that is being put in front of her.
She was asked about some of those Trump 1.0 programs and policies. Let me show you her answer on child separation, Rev.
Senator, the Trump administration never had a family separation policy. They had a zero tolerance policy, which said that our laws would be followed. What I'm alarmed by is the over 300,000 children that went missing during the Biden administration. And when we talk about children and what they're potentially facing as far as victimization in this country and the trafficking that's going on, this administration's lack of desire to find out where those children are or what they may be going through is alarming to me.
Let's put aside what happened in the past. There are still 1,000 children who are separated and waiting to be reunited. I'd like your commitment that you're going to continue the effort to reunite them with their parents.
Senator, keeping families together is critically important to me and to this country. I'm concerned about Laken Riley's family, that they no longer have her. I'm concerned about the fact that we have people in this country that don't know where their children are, or people in other countries who sent their children here and they've been lost by this administration.
I think it's clear that she is unprepared, not only for the examination, but to take the job, because much of what she was saying clearly had nothing to do with the position that she's been nominated for. Donald Trump himself has said that he's going to separate families, and the parents ought to understand that, and they can go with they'll take their children with them. I mean, this is not something that has been vague. He has said that himself. So either she's going to defend the policy, or either she's going to attack the policy, or admit she doesn't know what she's doing. And I would say that it's one of the last two. I also think that Vaughn is right to bring up Arpaio. Let's not forget when we were out there, when I was out there, Vaughn was a little guy, didn't have a beard yet. When I was out there leading protests with others with Arpaio, Arpaio became one of the biggest supporters of Donald Trump.
Yeah, the first recipient of a pardon, I
That's
think.
right. He was the first recipient of a pardon, and he toured around Arizona helping Donald Trump. So, and Arpaio was the symbol. He became the personification of having people's families separated, racially profiling people, because they were not pulling people over that they thought looked like they come from Canada. This was all based on race. And then he would parade them around and make them wear pink underwear once they had held them incarcerated until they deported them. That is who Donald Trump is, and that's who he says he is. And you can agree or disagree, but let's not distort what he's made clear.
TikTok's lawyers had really tried to argue this was a First Amendment case. Are you surprised at all by this ruling?
I'm not, for a couple of reasons. First, Anna, anybody who watched that oral argument, or listened to it rather, would know that the justices were deeply suspect of the argument that this presented real First Amendment concerns. And even Justice Sotomayor, who concurred in the judgment here, meaning she agrees with the end result, but perhaps for slightly different reasons, says the question we face today is not the law's wisdom, only its constitutionality. Given just a handful of days after oral argument to issue an opinion, I cannot profess the kind of certainty I would like to have about the arguments and record before us. All I can say is that at this time and under these constraints, the problem, and I want to get back to what the problem is, appears real, and the response to it not unconstitutional. And the problem that Justice Sotomayor is referring to is the national security problem that the government talked about repeatedly in its briefs and at its oral argument. The argument was twofold, that TikTok presents a national security concern in two ways. One, because its owners and the Chinese government by association can use it to harvest data about all the people who are using it. And two, the algorithm can be manipulated to push out to users content that the owners, and again, by extension, the Chinese government wants us to see, allowing them not only to control what we see, but perhaps to have undue influence on our elections and otherwise. So no, I'm not surprised by this result. Do I think this is the end of the story, however? I don't. I think there are a number of things and innings left to play, so to speak, both for Congress and for the incoming president, and maybe even for the Biden administration in its remaining hours to extend the life of TikTok, perhaps find another buyer, and or give them more time to consider what its options are.
I mean, at this point, Brian, this ban goes into effect on Sunday. That's 2 days from now. What can these 170 million Americans who have the app currently use it? There's all of these small businesses that are part of the app and are generating money for the American economy. What can these people expect to happen?
Yeah, well, our understanding was that any sort of company that basically provides TikTok services would not be able to do so starting on Sunday. So what that would look like is not being able to download the app through the App Store on Google or your iPhones, and then also not being able to update the app. Now, as far as whether or not, if you already have it installed on your phone, you'd be able to continue scrolling, well, that was an open question, and it actually sounded like the TikTok Council in oral arguments didn't necessarily know if it was going to be operable, at least for those that already have the app. But we just heard from Ryan down in D.C. that was saying that the Biden administration said that it doesn't plan on levying that penalty as written in the law for vendors that would be providing TikTok with those services. So if you were, let's say, an Oracle and you use your servers to allow people to scroll on their phones on this app, well, they might not be penalized if the Biden administration says at least for that one day on Sunday, we won't enforce it, and then allow the Trump administration, once inauguration happens on Monday, to then deal with that issue. If that is the case, there is reason to think that maybe those that have TikTok won't necessarily have their services interrupted. But again, these are big questions. Yeah. The way that this happens in practical terms is very much unknown. It is a weekend as well. I don't know if everyone at TikTok US is going to be in the office on that day. A lot of outstanding questions. But again, it could be the case that we don't see any difference on Sunday, but it could also be the case that we might see some sort of lag or some sort of interruptions for those that do have the app.
Let me read from the opinion as well. We conclude that the challenged provisions do not violate petitioners' First Amendment rights. The judgment of the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit is affirmed. So that, again, just saying essentially this has lost in multiple courts as far as the challenge to the ban. The ban is upheld. That ban set to go into effect on Sunday. Barrett, lots of questions remain then in terms of what's next, because as we've heard, both the Biden administration as well as the incoming Trump administration have expressed their desire to do something that could potentially delay the ban from going into effect. First of all, just your reaction to this ruling, and do you see legal avenues to proceed here?
Yeah, I liked how Lisa said it. I think there definitely are still innings left to play here. I'm not surprised by this opinion. I think after watching the oral arguments and hearing how the justices were signaling how they saw this issue, this isn't surprising, particularly given that the D.C. Circuit's opinion was very well written, and also by three judges that really were across the ideological spectrum. As far as what comes next, I think there's a lot of question there. So President-elect Trump has indicated that now he is a supporter of TikTok and maybe trying to do things to undo this ban. I think there's several things that could happen, right? I mean, you could imagine a world where President Trump directs his Attorney General Bondi not to enforce this law. I think that would put companies like Apple and Oracle in a really tricky situation. Do they follow the letter of the law, or do they trust the president's assurances that the Justice Department is not going to enforce it? The law also gives President Trump some wiggle room in how he would determine whether or not a divestiture actually or a sale had actually occurred. So one could also imagine a situation where President Trump, who really has touted himself as the ultimate deal maker, gets into the weeds here and tries to help either facilitate some sort of a divestiture or is able to somehow define whether or not a divestiture has happened such that the app can continue to operate in the United States. But I liked that analogy. There are definitely still innings left to play. I think this is still some unsettled questions here.
I mean, could Trump come in on the 20th and issue an executive order, or even Biden, before he leaves, issue an executive order, hit and pause, saying, let's extend the decision to ban at least for a certain number of days?
I mean, I think that's a question. He tried to do that back in the first Trump administration. He tried to ban TikTok by executive order, and that's where the Supreme Court had stepped in and said, actually, we can't do this by executive order. We're in a different position now, so possibly, but I think that would also have to go in front of the court. So it's unsettled.
No doubt. Barrett, please stay with us. Brian, I'm curious if there is any action in terms of somebody potentially swooping in at the last minute and purchasing TikTok from ByteDance.
Yeah, and as Lisa and I have kind of been looking through the opinion, I mean, it's mentioned a number of times that, look, there is a way that TikTok could have avoided all this, which is that they could have divested the company. So I think that now that we have the Supreme Court decision, it's basically upholding the law, which said if TikTok doesn't want to ban and people still want to scroll on TikTok, then ByteDance, which is its Chinese parent company, would just have to sell the company. Now, whether or not there'll be a buyer out there is a question that the Trump administration is going to have to answer if we know that, let's say, for example, there isn't a disruption to the app on Sunday. Again, President Trump gets inaugurated on Monday, and then he could try to find some sort of solution. I think a qualified divestiture is the way that it's described in the law. Maybe it's not a wholesale purchase of the whole company. Maybe it's a substantial stake that's purchased in TikTok US as a subsidiary that would then allow the president to say, you know what, in my view as the president, that basically checks the box of a qualified divestiture. Please carry on. But
Are
again,
there serious buyers, though, at this point?
Not that we've really heard of. I mean, there have been some reported rumors that maybe Elon Musk could be someone. Again, this is a very complicated situation because this isn't a phone call from one boardroom to the other. You have the Chinese and also the U.S. government that would be involved here. But what we do know is that it would take time to make that happen. So does that look like perhaps some sort of Trump action to kick the can down the road temporarily to get, let's say, a few extra months to then ink some sort of deal or some sort of a purchase? But again, that's very much uncertain at this time.
To Brian's point, former and future President Trump asked the Supreme Court for exactly that. He wanted a stay to give him time to negotiate a different solution. In their opinion here, and again, this is a unanimous opinion of the court, 2 justices wrote separately, but they are all in agreement. This is an unsigned opinion. They did not give incoming President Trump what he asked for, a stay of the law. They upheld the law just as it is. So if there is a solution here, either it has to be found in the next couple of days, or we could talk about a solution where, for example, TikTok could go down for a couple of days and then be revived by a qualified divestiture. There are a number of different solutions here, but one of them is not the Supreme Court saying to President Trump, hey, you can press pause because we trust that you can negotiate a different solution to this law than the one that presently exists.
I mean, it sounds like they're saying the law is very clear here. They don't need more time to decipher what the decision should be. And let me read from the opinion. The challenge provisions are facially content neutral. They impose TikTok-specific prohibitions due to a foreign adversary's control over the platform and make divestiture a prerequisite for the platform's continued operation in the United States. They do not target particular speech based upon its content. Let me bring in Aaron Gilchrist from the White House. And Aaron, we know the Biden administration was trying to maneuver here. Should this be the outcome of the Supreme Court's decision? Should the ban be upheld, or if the possibility the Supreme Court hadn't ruled yet? Do we know what the Biden administration is prepared to do, and what options are there right now as they see it?
Well, effectively, as your guests have noted, the Biden administration is prepared to do nothing. When this law goes into effect on Sunday, 2 administration officials have told our team that the plan from the Biden administration is not to start doling out billions of dollars in fines to the App Store, to the Apple App Store, to Google Play, if they allow these applications to continue to function on their platforms. We have to sort of step back to the last couple of months of the Biden administration when, for example, the press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, has been asked repeatedly if the White House wanted to see this ban go into effect. And she repeatedly said that the White House doesn't want to see a ban. This law calls for a divestiture, and that it expected ByteDance to adhere to the law from that perspective in terms of trying to sell the platform. Obviously, that's something that has not happened. And so in the last several hours, late last night, we learned from some administration sources that the Biden administration does not plan to start fining these companies that support the TikTok platform because they allow it to continue to function. And so I think, given the fact that this does happen on a Sunday, Monday is a federal holiday with the inauguration of the new president, we should not expect to see any action, any movement from the federal government in terms of enforcing this law. Now, it is going to be a law, and therefore it does have to be enforced in some way. At the same time, the understanding that we have at this point is that we won't start to see fines enacted if there is no action taken on part of the technology companies that would be sort of caught up in this law. The Trump team, the transition team for President Trump, has said that this is a platform that he favors. We saw Mike Waltz, the incoming national security advisor for President-elect Trump, say on television just yesterday that that team is actively engaged in trying to figure out how to make sure TikTok does not get shut down here in the United States.
CNBC's Fast Money veteran Jalen Ratigan drew on his Wall Street experience to rebuke corporate greed and rigged systems, including in an MSNBC rant that went viral in 2011. He wrote the book Greedy Bastards, Taking on Big Finance's Systemic Failures. He launched an effort to curb growing billionaire power over democracy called Get Money Out. He even ran for Congress, losing in a Democratic primary in the district now held by Elise Stefanik, who is the fourth-ranking House Republican. She chairs that conference, so it's a pretty different vision for that seat than had Dylan Ratigan won it. So you can see where I'm going. We thought of him at this inflection point to discuss the backlash to this whole billionaire bubble. And Ratigan's not just a former colleague, by the way. We got to know each other pretty well on his MSNBC show. At his request, I conducted a 2012 on-air exit interview with him when he left. You can see some of the visuals there. It was a conversation that was, like Dylan Ratigan, characteristically plucky, spirited, and relentlessly independent. Ratigan was actually just back at CNBC this month for an anniversary. He divides his time between America and Italy as the co-founder of a European luxury boutique, continues to edit and write as the global editor at Tasty Live, and we are thrilled to bring him back for this conversation. Dylan Ratigan, welcome back.
Incredible that you're still here.
Yeah.
Incredible that Donald Trump is back.
Yeah.
Incredible that we're going to do 12 years with Biden-Trump. Incredible that that's going to define people's view of government in America for a generation. Incredible that you could get more out of the next 4 years than you've ever gotten in the history of America.
Wow. Let me put something up where I want to start. You said something off air recently. You look at the popular vote margins, it's gotten closer over the years. Trump is narrow in the vote. 1.5 points is actually what he did this time. Less than what Biden did last time, for example. But you said, don't just look at that margin. Look at how many Americans don't even bother voting, and they're registered. This is not just everybody. People who are registered but didn't vote in 24. 89 million people sitting out. What does that tell you?
To me, because the American system doesn't have no confidence in the way that a parliamentary system in Italy, in England, in a European system, there is no confidence in the American political system. There's no confidence apparatus. And so I look at the people who are registered to vote and able to vote and qualified to vote, who outnumber everybody who votes for a Democrat and everybody who votes for a Republican, not as an expression of apathy, but rather as an expression of disgust and disengagement for a system that they believe has failed.
So let's go right there to your point. We hear so often, oh, they don't care, they're not tuned in. You're actually reading that very differently. You're saying they care, they're pissed, but they've given up on these choices.
There's more than given up. They've voted no confidence.
Yeah.
I would rather anything, than to participate in this phony decision.
Okay. You know a lot about business. Why are you laughing?
No, I mean, I thought that was funny.
You know a lot about business.
I know some things about business.
Yeah, you do. And you were on a whole financial channel, and that was your beat. And you came over here and you did the thing I showed. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the people at the top, they say things are actually going great, and it's going to spread out and work well for everyone. And as you know, because now we've worked together, I've been around you a long time, I like to deal in evidence, and I like to hear what everyone's saying. So I want to play for you what business leaders, and some of them would say, yeah, Ratigan followed it, but we're doing the work, and we're hiring the employees, and we're building the factories. Take a listen to what they say, which is different than you.
We're seeing an acceleration of activity, particularly on the banking side, which is quite encouraging.
I would say I'm more optimistic about the economy, the country in a very long time.
Because the economy is stronger than, certainly much stronger than we all thought.
The belief in the economy.
A lot of bankers, they're like dancing in the street.
We're stepping into, I would say, the most pro-growth, pro-business, pro-American administration I've perhaps seen in my adult lifetime.
Are they wrong?
No, I think that absolutely is hopefully correct. The two things can be equal at the same time, or the two things can exist in parallel. The people who could vote but don't can be voting no confidence, disengaged with a failing system. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, the people that are the lead supporters of the winning candidate can also be correct that there's a bigger set of opportunities now to do more than there ever has been. which I also believe is true.
In business.
And in life. I think that politically, with the arrival of such an outside force as a return of Trump with his crew, and including RFK, who I think is a very powerful voice, and the rest of his cabinet, whether people like it or not. And I think it's going to create ideas and thoughts and pathways for deals in every sense of the word than it ever has. And that can be catastrophic insofar as the entire integrity of the currency and the economy could be compromised by a lunatic. Or it could be the most creative and prosperous time in American history because it doesn't go out of bounds, and at the same time, it permits for more possibilities.
Does that prosperity, that so-called prosperity, does it
activity?
Yeah, the activity. Okay, returns. We see Wall Street. Does that naturally get out to the people?
Not.
No. Why not?
Because you have different systems. You have 3 money systems. You have a survival money system, which is a treadmill people can almost never get off.
Yep.
You have a lifestyle money system, which is people that are in the middle somewhere where they're paying a mortgage and they're doing this and they've got to work and whatever. And then you have people that have, let's say, more than $500 million, where no matter what they do, they can't run out of money. Because it's like, think of it like water, ice, and steam. So water would be the solid manifestation of an economy. Ice would be the bottom, unmovable. Water in the middle, and steam at the top, where no matter what you do, you're always creating more money above 500.
Because they can't lose when they're
you're exposed to assets, and all assets are more valuable all the time, and you by definition own assets.
And the regular
and there's
work,
nothing you can do to not have money.
And the regular worker is
now paying 15 or 20 bucks for a piece of cheese,
right,
which is why they're firing the incumbent.
And what,
full stop.
What type of H2O is that? What are they?
That would be water.
They're water, and so they're not going to see that benefit in their paycheck. No one sees it. Go on.
Yeah, nobody sees the benefit outside of the service industry.
When money comes pumping back in because people are spending it.
But the more you incentivize people like Ackman and Musk to invest in solutions for America, to invest in the future of humanity, like to invest in success with the things that matter the most to America, I think that there's a lot that's possible. Yeah. And it just becomes a question of how are we organizing that discussion? And is that discussion really what's going to happen? Which I think that's the most optimistic version of the situation, which would correlate to the folks you were putting on television. But it doesn't mean that the biggest voting bloc is the one that's disengaged.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 2 worlds. There's a world of political parties controlled by wealthy individuals in cities primarily, financially.
Yeah.
And then they have messages that match targeted audiences. And the audience that's targeted, whether it's a city person or a country person or a northern person or a southern person, is targeted as an asset of the party. And the party's objective is to preserve itself, which is why you had the same people over and over. It's why Donald Trump, again, why Joe Biden runs his vice president. It's 2 institutions that are preserving themselves. And there's no apparent way for it to reform but for it to collapse on itself, and we'll see what happens. I do think that whether it's Ackman or Musk, who I think are 2 of the better new voices in terms of what's possible, you're better to respond positively and get on the field and go. Everybody there's more opportunity the next 4 years to do more interesting things, to solve more big problems than there ever has been, or that's the promise. We're promised a more efficient government. I'd like that. We're promised a government that more quickly deploys capital to solve big problems. I would love that. And so we're going to all find out together how much of this happens. But I think everything becomes more likely, if not inevitable, if we make it happen. Which I know is a cliche. But
yeah, but you view the 2-party system.
I think it's time to get in, not out, I guess.
Sure, and but that's also your energy. You're a get in kind of guy.
I know, but now's a good time to get in.
Okay, but I don't care how cold the water is. You're never the guy being like, it's too cold. If it's liquid, and you know water can turn into,
you're gonna give me my metaphor back? A gas.
Steam. A gas, yeah. Water could, I don't know if you know this. Water can turn into a gaseous state. But if it's liquid, you're going to get in.
I mean, what I'm saying is when you have a new president and a new set of leadership, which is all these tech buddies, that it's an invitation to do things that have never been done before at a time when doing things has never been more possible. And I think that is not just something you do once in a while when the water is the right temperature.
Yeah.
I think it's very rare that you have this much new possibility.
Can we close with a lightning round?
Anything you want. I'm a guest.
In a word or a sentence, the best thing about capitalism is?
Solutions. The best solutions in the fastest time.
The worst thing about it is?
Misrepresenting theft as value creation and pretending to be a value creator when you're a thief.
The Democratic Party
is a corporation.
The Republican Party
is a corporation.
Running for Congress, I learned
that the most valuable skills are character assassination and fundraising to get ahead in politics.
One thing I don't miss about television is?
The plaza at 30 Rockefeller Center. Too many people every day.
The crowds, the tourists, sure. One thing I do miss is?
Wearing nice Italian suits.
When people come up to me and say, I remember you from that rant, I feel...
Say, and nothing's changed. Can you believe it after all this time? I could have said it yesterday.
Wow. Is that what you say?
Mm-hmm.
Do people still come up to you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They think it happened recently.
Oh, right, because it goes on. Well,
it'll return, and the content of that discussion, despite my frustration at the time, I was in the middle of writing the book. The whole thing it was personal.
Well, the internet has no clock.
Yeah.
Someone sends something and say, "Oh, it's here." Okay. And finally,
yes, too many words.
Dylan Ratigan. My hope for this year is
the biggest opportunities yet for everyone that shows up.